Hey, so glad you could join me today for PJ's Storytime. I have another great tale I'd like to share with you. Once upon a time, many years ago, there lived a certain rich gentleman who lost his wife and had just one little girl. After a long time, he married again because he thought it would be better for his little girl as he had to be away from home so much. This second wife had two daughters of her own, and she was very proud of them. But they were very selfish and disagreeable girls. In fact, as soon as father would be away on a journey, mother and daughters too would be unkind to little Ella, or Cinderella, as they called her. You see, they made her stay by the great open fireplace and tend the fire until she was all covered with ashes. She was compelled to do all the hard work in the household. She scoured the dishes, scrubbed the floors, and gathered wood to burn in the great open fire. She liked to do this, however, for it took her to the forest, and she loved to listen to the wind whispering in the tops of the tall pines. She used to think it sounded like fairies playing on little harps. And once in the forest, she found a little lost kitten and brought it home, and it lived with her in the big fireplace, and they would both sit and watch the fire. The cat was company for Cinderella, though she could not understand anything the cat told her. It sounded just like purring, but if she had understood the cat language, she would have known how much the cat loved her. As time went on, Cinderella grew more ragged and her long golden hair more tangled. But her little face grew more beautiful because she was both kind and patient. Then one day it became known that the king of the country had ordered a great ball. It was to be held 3 nights, and all the girls of that kingdom were to attend, for the most beautiful was to be chosen as the betrothed to the young prince. So everyone, young and old, was talking about the grand ball and how they were going to attend and how beautiful their dresses were going to be. Cinderella heard about it too and wanted to go. She begged and pleaded, but the stepmother and the 2 proud sisters laughed her to scorn and said, "How would you look at the king's ball in your rags and your wooden shoes and all covered with cinders?" Cinderella begged them to loan her one of their very oldest party dresses. Anyone would do. But they just laughed on and turned up their noses at her. Then Cinderella went back to the fireplace, the tears rolling down her cheeks. The little cat crept near and tried to comfort her. But it was hard indeed to see the stepmother and the 2 proud sisters start for all the ball and to be left behind. Just then a poor old woman came to the door and begged for something to eat. Cinderella was so sorry for her that she gave the old woman all of her own supper. Then a most wonderful thing happened. The old woman turned into a little fairy godmother in less than a minute, who smiled and said, "For your kind heart, little Cinderella, I will grant you anything you wish." Cinderella could scarcely believe her ears, but she said, "Oh, fairy godmother, I wish I could go to the king's ball." "Nothing easier," answered the fairy. "But bring me the biggest pumpkin, for you will need a coach." Cinderella remembered seeing a huge one in the garden, and truly it was so big she found she could hardly carry it into the house. "Now I shall need some rats and some mice," said the fairy, and as Cinderella remembered where the traps were, she managed to bring them in, though she disliked touching the creatures. But the fairy godmother just touched them with her wand, and the pumpkin turned into a great golden coach, and the rats into 6 lovely white prancing ponies with long flowing manes and waving tails, and the mice became coachmen, all in fine livery. You never saw anything quite so fine. Cinderella was so surprised and delighted she could not speak. Looking at the coach, then at herself, she asked, "But how can I go to the ball in these rags?" She had no more than uttered the words before the fairy touched her with her wand, and lo, Cinderella's clothes were changed in a twinkling, from the little golden crown on her head to the dear little golden glass slippers on her tiny feet. Everything she wore was lovely. She tried to thank the fairy godmother, but instead the fairy hurried her into the great coach, warning her to remember one thing. She must leave the ball at 12 o'clock, or all her fine things would turn back to rags and the coach would disappear. Cinderella promised, and the coachmen cracked their whips, and off the ponies galloped to the king's ball. When Cinderella appeared in the palace, everyone wondered who this beautiful princess could be. Her clothes were handsome, and her jewels were brighter than any others there. When the prince led her out to dance, even the stepmother and her 2 proud daughters looked on in envy, exclaiming over her loveliness. Right in the midst of her happiness, while she was dancing with the prince, Cinderella remembered her promise about 12 o'clock, and as she looked at the big clock, saw it was only a minute of the hour. She had to hurry, but managed to get off just in time. The next night, Cinderella came dressed finer than before, and astonished everyone by her beauty and wonderful clothes. The prince danced with her more than ever and begged her to tell him where she came from, but she would not. She had so very much to think about during the evening, she very nearly forgot all about the hour she must leave. Indeed, the clock began to strike, but she got away in time. But oh, the last night, that was the best of all. Cinderella had never looked so lovely. The prince vowed he would marry no one but her, and in the midst of it all, the clock struck 12. Cinderella had to run for her life and dropped one of her golden glass slippers as she rushed outdoors. As she ran, her clothes all changed back to rags. Her coach had disappeared, and she saw the last rat scurry away under the bushes. She had to run all the way home, and at last she sank down in the ashes by the fireplace, all out of breath. As the stepmother and the proud sisters reached home after the ball, Cinderella heard them talking about the wonderful, mysterious princess, how she had suddenly disappeared, how the prince searched everywhere for her, how he had found one of her tiny glass slippers, and how he was going to have the whole kingdom searched until he found her. Indeed, he declared he would marry no one but this beautiful princess. The very next day, criers were dispatched far and near through the kingdom, reading a proclamation from the king, saying that the lady who could wear the tiny glass slipper was to wed the prince. 2 other royal courtiers of the king went to every house with the little glass slipper to find its owner, but no foot was small enough to get it on. At last they came to the house of the proud stepmother. She tried to put it on, but her foot was much too wide and much too fat. Then the elder daughter tried, but she couldn't even get her big toe in it. And the younger tried very, very hard, but could not get it on at all. Then the royal courtiers demanded to know if there was no one else in the house, and they said, "No, No one but Cinderella with her rags and old wooden shoes. But the courtiers said, "Bring her to us." And so Cinderella had to come out of the chimney corner and try on the slipper. She sat down on a little bench, and on went the slipper just as easy. And in that moment she was changed to the lovely being that had been at the king's ball. While everyone stood astonished, the fairy godmother appeared and pointed her wand at the stepmother and her daughters and said, "It was your own evil thoughts and selfish natures that made you ugly and unloved." When the prince heard the good news that the beautiful maiden had been found, he came himself in the royal coach to escort her back to the palace. And they were married at once with great pomp and ceremony, and they lived happily ever after. You may be sure, too, that Cinderella did not forget to bring her little cat to the palace. There she learned to carry Cinderella's train and was a great pet with everyone, and wore a gold collar all set with diamonds. The end.